Hi, and welcome to today's talk. We're here with two of our artists from the exhibition Textural Codes, with Camila Quintero, a Colombian artist developing her practice here in the UK, and Sofía Clausse, an Argentinian artist currently studying at the Royal Academy of Arts. And we will see where you will live afterwards. I don't know if you would stay here. But today we're going to talk about your two artworks and your two processes, and in a way how they correlate and how they situate themselves within the Latin American art history. I think both of your works have a strong background within the Latin American art history. And we can explore a bit both of your works relating to both your gestures. I wanted to start with you, Sofía. We have here one of your paintings, and I feel like you have a strong influence of language and how the visual element within language, more than a tool to communicate, it's also a visual language itself, and it's constructed by the tools that we use to make it. And this is something that we discussed in the past, but it's something that attracts to me the most. So you can explore a bit more about these tools that you make them yourself and how it builds this new like visual universe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks a lot for having me here. But yeah, so I do a lot of these paintings with tools that I make. So they're like custom tools. And what I'm interested in is finding how these tools behave. So what kind of mark do they make? And this has to do with the tool and also with my body. So it's that relationship and also with the materials that I'm using. So it's this kind of like triangular thing happening with myself, the tool, and the materials. And I was really interested in looking at how the tools make specific gestures, and then through those gestures I can make text or letters that fit within those limitations. So in the example of this painting, the tool makes these parallel lines, and I was interested in seeing how just with lines we can create letters. And there is this idea of like language being something visual as well. And in this, for example, thinking to some Latin American artists in Argentina, I look at Mirta Versace a lot because she has this idea of of language being something that you can look at rather than just read. And I'm interested in using that. So using language itself as a material. So how could I shape it? How could I actually like mold it or use it physically, like as another material in my studio? So then the letters themselves are like a material.
Absolutely. I think, this is one of your strongest points, precisely that you use the visual element of language itself, that is not used as a tool to communicate something necessarily, although you can actually read some text. And in a way, it relates a bit to how you build the image itself. But beyond that, you can construct a visual world. In this other painting that we have here, one of the things that attracts to me the most is that if you step away from the painting, you can read the letters themselves, but the closer you get, it transforms into a completely different universe that could be read as a glitch, could be read as a city, could be read as so many different things. And how the power of words to become more of a formal exploration than a content exploration. It's no longer what you're trying to say with the words that you're using, but the forms and the shapes that you're creating as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. And also like how that all starts with the line. And I find that the line is something that also goes through my work a lot. So with this one, all of these tools make these parallel lines, and they're also almost like a weaving in itself when you start with the warp threads. And like weaving is also something that I look at a lot, and this connection between text and textiles, which goes back very historically, even like how we used to read in this direction, and that's kind of like how you weave. And how these lines could become like a surface, but also they could become the lines with which you write.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like that's also a correlation that exists in Spanish with the word trama, that it means plot, and also the weaving I don't know how to translate trama, like the pattern that the weaving creates. And it relates a bit with this infinite gestures that you create with the tools here, that you move from a visual language so that you can see the text and you can see the words. And then just like Mirta Dermisache and maybe Mira Schendel, you move away from that using this visual language to create this series of infinite lines, infinite movements, that I want to explore a bit more about that in order also to connect a bit with your work, with this idea of infinite and time, and how this formal reality constructs a new visual infinite language or visual language.
Yeah, like how like reading is like such a timely thing, and how even like the way that we write could be timely. So I was doing these looping shapes and then putting text into the loops so that the text themselves could be infinite. And with that, I really like how how you lay out text can help to communicate it as well. Yeah. Kind of like how in concrete poetry, you like the way that you arrange the letters in a page has just as much to do with the communication as the text itself.
And it creates this new reality. Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned concrete poetry, because it also relates a bit with your process, Camila, as well, and how this formal exploration of language also becomes also a formal exploration of geometrical shapes. And in a way, one of my main questions and one of the lines that puts together also this exhibition is this research that it's a questioning, like, what is the difference between drawing and painting? Like, drawing and writing. Drawing and writing. There are two different gestures, but at the same time, they are very similar. And many artists have explored this question, like Mirta, like Mira Schendel, and also like the neo-concretist artists that have been like joined these two realities between language, the form and shapes of language, and geometrical shapes and geometrical explorations. And precisely this idea of time, because you have a series of part of your work that is focused on this idea of time and constructing time in with geometrical shapes. So I want to ask you about that particular series and how you envision this idea of time and geometry.
Well, the series are called The Life of a Day, and they are based on the reaction that we have to environment and the time, and how we interpret that within ourselves. So it's telling the story of a day. It goes like in a cyclical form, as your word does in a way. But it's not showing like we normally see the morning with the sunrise, but it's more like different types of days. We have different emotions related with every one of those works. And it's more like how the viewer interprets those elements within the work. So everyone has a subjective way to see it and to relate to it based on their own experiences as a human beings.
Absolutely. And I feel like that is the power of geometry. Your work shows a strong tradition of geometrical art history within the Latin American art context, and especially in an exploration of concepts that are very difficult to place within a figure. So you need to really use geometry as a source of trying to arrive to those concepts, especially with this idea that you both mentioned about time and narration. Is something, one of the reasons, or one of the distinctions that people find between writing and painting, where when you read, there's a time sequence, beginning, middle, and end, that you question here in your artwork, in both your lines and your sentences that don't have that sequence. That there's no beginning, there's no middle, there's no end, because you use infinite sentences. And also at the same time, you question the same idea, but in the opposite end with geometry, and how, in a way, within painting, people assume that painting, it's immediate. You read the narration of the image straight away because you see it in the painting immediately. But here you see a sequence as well. You see a sequence that might have a beginning and a middle and an end, and it takes you, the viewer, a timely process to explore both narrations and in a series of time. But before we go this, I want to explore this infinite lines that you create and how it unites a bit this formal and content exploration in your work.
With the lines.
Infinite looks like the one that we have exhibited in here.
Yeah. Well, actually, first, while you were talking about it, I was thinking in this particular piece that I was looking at with the geometry, just going back to that, about how it's doing this like back and forth as well. Like there's this like illusion of like what is in front, what is behind them, and then I felt there was like a nice parallel with this one as well. Like the black was the last thing that I painted, and the part that is on top, but it's also like the background. I thought there was this nice idea also about how like you can go like back and forth, and then with the infinity, it's also this loop, like these things like always in repetition, but also like always cycling in a different like in a different like in a different loop. And with the text, with the loops that I was doing, I wanted to create sentences that have no beginning and no end, and you can start reading them from maybe from the top, and as you read it has a different meaning than if you read it from the bottom. Or you can also connect the two shapes like in a chain, and then that has another meaning. So it's what I really like is using a text in a painting as a way of reading all over, or in different orders, where in writing it's always.
Absolutely, it makes me think a bit about Julio Cortázar Rayuela in a way that, explores different ways of writing and different ways of reading and different interactions of the viewer in how you read and approach the text. But I want to go back to what you mentioned, because this idea of foreground and background that you see here, and that questions a bit like this reality of what is the foreground, what is the background, and how the importance of the viewer to give that information and to complete that information in the painting, I think in your case is key. And the same exploration that we see with other Latin American artists like Ligia Papa and Ligia Clark have explored this notion of gestalt and the participation of the mind of the viewer. At the end of the day, the viewer is the one that finishes the painting. You started it, you put it out in the universe, but then the viewer needs to be there to give this and fill up these different meanings of what is the foreground, what is the background, where are all they placed, what shapes are they creating. I don't know if you had any of this in mind when you were composing this painting.
Well, yes, I present all these elements for the viewer to explore, but the way that I approach the canvas when it's white is also completely improvised. It's a form of control automatism. I know what I want to do, but in a way I let myself freely to develop it as I go with the drawing. I also have a background as a designer, so I use the basic elements of design and all the Bauhaus principles, the Gestalt principles. I got them present within my compositions when I'm going to work. But it's to put these elements to the viewer to explore, to be able to, in their own minds, rotate the image, to go behind, to want to see more of this bidimensional image, to find the three-dimensional aspect just by using their own imagination. So that's what is so interesting, is like when people come to me and tell me what they see based on the elements that they have in front of them.
Absolutely. I think it's beautiful what you said, that at the end of the day, yes, it's the viewer that creates it, but also the fact that when you see geometry, you imagine this is a very controlled environment. It's a very controlled situation that you would assume is very planned. It's very neatly put together, whereas you show this hazardous element within your compositions that in a way work because of this hazardous reality, and at the end it ends up constructing a new reality for the viewer to see. And this intervention from the viewer for me is very important, that the viewer in a way constructs the world and at the end finishes. And this element of design, I find it very beautiful that you both come from a design background, right? And how both these practices have influenced your artwork right now. I feel Bauhaus criticized a bit the distinction between art and design. And we have gone back a bit to that and clearly putting them aside and saying design is here, art is here, but you find barriers that cross both worlds at the same time and through a conceptual exploration that you both explore. So how this design has also influenced your work as well.
Yeah, and I think also like the Bauhaus, what they did a lot was between art, design, and craft as well. Like I'm thinking now mainly about like Annie Almers and her weaving works, and how she brought that into like an art of her own. But yeah, for me it was mainly looking at letters and typography, looking at how they are made like on a very like minuscule level, and how that influences how you can understand the tool that has been used by looking at a letter very carefully, and then kind of like flipping that question for me, like so making my own tools, my own systems, and seeing how like what happens once you make that.
Absolutely. I found it very beautiful discussing this with you previously, that you see the limitation of your body in the way and the shapes that you create, because at the end of the day you magnify the tools that were meant to be very minuscule to write like tiny letters, you made them huge through the tools that you're making. But then you find that the limitation of your body, of how, for example, if you're doing a circle, you can only do 90 degrees, you cannot turn your arm.
Or you have to do it like in a different surface, like on the floor if it's like really big.
Absolutely. So at the end, it's your own performance as an artist putting together this artworks as well. And also in your case, because both of you work quite in large dimensions, do you find like also this performance from your part putting together these geometrical shapes? Is there like a limitation of your intervention or not?
No, I think for me what is important is to have the connection with the medium, to have connection with the canvas. I actually want to go bigger, and I want to explore different kind of mediums as well, traditional and also new mediums like all the digital and VR. That would be something interesting to explore. But going back to this, I think that it doesn't matter the size. What matters is that connection that you create with your own work.
Yeah, because at the end, in terms of media, you also use a lot of prints, right? So we see here 2 prints, but there's a different relationship with the 2 prints that we exhibited here. Like one that we see here has this mirror glaze experience that in a way it necessarily unites the viewer with the artwork itself, because you see your own reflection, and not only you see your own reflection, the artwork reflects back to you, so you're painted with these colors, and also you can see it on the floor, like this projection of the colors on the floor. I find it very, very beautiful as well, how also through the exploration of your new media, you're transforming the way you engage with the artwork itself.
Yeah, I think for all the artworks, I have kind of the same way of working at the beginning. Once it develops, it transforms to something different, applied to different mediums. In relation with the digital works that have the reflective effect, it's one of the most interesting techniques because of that, because you can see yourself, you can see the effect of the light on the piece and on the surroundings as well. But also with the other print, I could say that that's a more traditional approach, is screen printing. But it also has an effective response based on what we have seen in traditional artworks from other artists as well.
Exactly. That one in particular has a very interesting gesture that it's also very optical, like it creates an optical illusion for you to explore, because it has an implied movement that it's very static, but you imagine it moving.
Yeah.
Because you imagine this shape of constantly moving. The same with your loops in a way. And for example, a lot of people have asked me that if those are prints, and they're not, they are paintings, right?
I think it's probably because of the flatness, which I find quite uncommon actually in a lot of our work, especially with the aluminum piece. How you're trying to do something like quite dimensional, huh? With geometry, but on a very like flat surface. Same with this one too, and with this back and forth thing, but at the end everything being on this like same plane.
Absolutely, playing with this idea of foreground and background, because with this ones, for example, the black you did last, like this one
too, yeah.
So you peeled off or not, like...
No, the black is like the painted last, yeah, just like as the back.
And you also have like, you juxtapose paper, and it's
yeah, that was to show a bit of the process that I would do. So almost so that they do have a bit of like time as well. So they have a bit of the before on the finished one.
Absolutely. This formal exploration of both your work, I feel is very interesting, because it's a bit opposed to the other artworks that we also exhibited in the exhibition, whose exploration was more focused on the content that they were trying to explore. But even though yours is a very formal exploration, has a very strong analysis behind and a strong content tradition behind, even though it's not manifest, you have to, as a viewer, inject that research yourself and carry new ways of experiencing the artworks. Also because geometry makes you think about certain concepts that cannot be represented with figures or maybe text, and you can only relate to them through geometrical lines or geometrical shapes that makes you think about something else. Is this something that you want to explore, like this other connections of concepts or ideas that can only be manifested through geometry?
What I feel is that I want to explore perspective, but it's also not only perspective as the way of we look at things, but perspective in people's minds as well. So we all see this image, but we all see it in a different way and in a different manner. And for me, it's important to recognize and to identify all those different ideas as well. I also want to explore a bit of, through the Gestalt, how the mind and the psychology of people works with the images as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's all related with ourselves, our surroundings, and the way that we perceive things.
Yeah, absolutely. The participation of the mind of the viewer becomes very important in both your works.
And also I get a lot of inspiration from atmospheric light, atmospheric colors. So even though some of the colors are plain, they come from things that I see, that I look at all day or every day, depending on the light, depending on the weather, and also because we have here all kind of seasons.
Yeah.
In South America, we don't have seasons, but we have diversity in all kind of flowers and nature. So it's taking things from everywhere.
So everyday life injected into a different language and geometry. So thank you so much for this wonderful exploration of both your works. We want to invite you to explore more of their artworks and the exhibition of textural codes. You can do this online, and you can explore it by yourself through our 3D virtual tour that you can find in our website. We're putting the website in the video so you can go straight away and look at it. Thank you so much, Via Art Prize, for inviting us to do these talks, exploring the works of Sofía and Camila. Thank you both for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.